My wife cheated on me with her gym trainer. She asked for half of everything in the divorce, but she didn't know that my dad secretly owned our house and savings. I never thought I'd be sharing my story here, but here I am. I'm 38 years old and work as an accountant. I've been with the same local firm for almost 12 years now. I've always considered myself a pretty practical and calm person, which is probably why I'm able to keep my cool through all of this. I'm married to Joyce, who's 35. We don't have any kids, and looking back, that seems like a blessing now. Joyce hasn't worked since we got married. She used to work in marketing, but once we tied the knot, she wanted to take a break and focus on us. I didn't mind because I make enough to support us both, and I thought it was just temporary. We've got a house and a decent amount of savings. It's nothing fancy, but we were comfortable. Joyce was home most of the time, but lately, things started to feel different. It's hard to say exactly when I first noticed, but she began to act distant. She'd stay out longer when she went out with her friends or to the gym, and she stopped being affectionate. Whenever I asked her what was going on, she'd get defensive. At first, I thought it was just stress or maybe a rough patch in our marriage. But as the weeks went by, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. And unfortunately, I was right. One evening, while Joyce was in the shower, her phone buzzed with a message. Out of reflex, I glanced at it. It was from a guy named James. At first, I didn't think much of it, but something about the way the message was written didn't sit right with me. It said, "Can't wait to see you tomorrow, babe." My stomach dropped. I opened the message, and what I found confirmed my worst fears. She had been seeing James, her gym trainer, for months. The texts were clear, there was no mistaking it. They were making plans for the future, plans that didn't include me. I just sat there, staring at her phone, frozen. I couldn't believe it. The woman I married, the person I trusted the most, was cheating on me. But instead of feeling angry or heartbroken, I just felt numb. Maybe it was the shock, or maybe it was my practical side kicking in, but I knew things were about to change. I had to talk to her without losing my temper. When she came out of the bathroom, I calmly handed her the phone and asked her to explain. At first, she tried to deny it, saying it was nothing and just a joke. But when I read some of the texts out loud to her, she realized there was no point in lying. "I want a divorce," she said, without showing any regret. There was no apology, no guilt, just a cold, emotionless statement. She admitted she had been seeing James for a while and wasn't happy in our marriage anymore. She didn't try to soften the blow. She was leaving me for him. What shocked me the most was what she said next. Without any hesitation, she started talking about splitting our stuff. She said she wanted half of everything, the house, the savings, everything we had built together. She even said she deserved it because she had given up her career to support mine. I couldn't believe her nerve. I stayed calm. Maybe it was because I was already emotionally done at that point, or maybe because I knew something she didn't. So I agreed. I told her if she wanted a divorce, I wouldn't fight her on it. She could have half of what she thought I had. She looked surprised, probably expecting me to argue or have an emotional breakdown, but I wasn't going to give her that satisfaction. What Joyce didn't know, and what I didn't feel like telling her, was that most of our assets were in my dad's name. My father is a smart guy, and years ago, when I started making decent money, he suggested I put all the big things, like the house and savings, under his name. He explained it was a way to protect myself in case something went wrong in the future, whether it was debts, lawsuits, or as it turns out a cheating wife. At the time, I didn't think much of it. It just seemed like smart financial planning. So, when Joyce demanded half of everything, I knew she wasn't going to get what she expected. On paper, I didn't own much, just a modest bank account, my car, and a few other small things. The house? Technically, it belonged to my dad. The bulk of my savings? Also under my dad's control. Instead of dragging this into a long court battle, I suggested we go through mediation. I thought it would be easier and cheaper for both of us. She agreed, clearly thinking she'd walk away with a big portion of my assets. But what she didn't know was that this setup with my dad had been in place for years. Honestly, I had almost forgotten about it myself until the divorce talk started. I had planned for something like this, but I can't deny how grateful I am for my dad's foresight. The house we lived in, along with most of the investments and savings Maria had her eyes on, were technically owned by him. I had always kept a low financial profile in my own name, living modestly enough that no one, including Maria, really questioned it. As soon as the divorce process started, I told my dad about it. He wasn't happy with the situation what father would be, but he understood the importance of keeping everything quiet. We consulted a lawyer just to make sure everything was legally solid, and it turns out everything was in perfect order. Maria could demand all she wanted, but there wasn't much in my name for her to take. Maria didn't waste any time and hired an aggressive divorce lawyer, one of those tough attorneys who promises to get everything they can. Meanwhile, I hired a low-key but experienced lawyer, someone who specializes in cases like mine, where there are complicated financial situations. I didn't want a big fight, but I also wasn't going to let Maria and her lawyer push me around. The first step in the divorce process was the asset disclosure, where each person has to show what they own. As you can imagine, this didn't go the way Maria had hoped. I laid everything out honestly, just like the law requires. But when she saw how little there was in my name, her lawyer's confident smile started to fade. I could tell they were both confused, maybe even suspicious, but there wasn't much they could do. Everything I provided was true, and I wasn't hiding any assets. Right there, Maria started yelling at me, calling me names and accusing me of lying. But like I said, I gave her everything I had. After all the shouting and accusations, I told her we could talk again once she calmed down. And now here I am, turning to Reddit because I'm not sure if I handled this the right way. So, Reddit, am I wrong for agreeing to give her half of what's mine, knowing she's not actually getting what she expects? Update, things are starting to get more intense. After the initial asset disclosure, Maria was in total disbelief. She kept accusing me of hiding things, and her lawyer wasn't much better. The look on their faces when they saw the modest numbers was priceless. It didn't take long for them to demand a deeper investigation. Maria kept asking where all the money was. She thought there should be a lot more after all these years. She couldn't believe that, after being married for so long, there wasn't more to divide. Her lawyer quickly hired a forensic accountant to dig deeper, thinking they could find hidden assets. I had saved some money in hidden accounts. At first, I was a bit nervous not because I had anything to hide, but because I knew this would drag the process out. But after talking with my lawyer and going over everything again, I realized there was nothing they could legally find. Everything I had claimed was 110% true, and there was no way to trace the assets in my dad's name. As the investigation went on, I could see Maria getting more and more frustrated. She was used to getting her way, but this time, there was nothing for her to take. It seemed like she couldn't believe that she was walking away with almost nothing. Maria then tried a new angle. She argued that she had contributed a lot to my career and our lifestyle by staying home and managing the house. She claimed that because she took care of things at home, I was able to focus on my job and advance in my career. While I admit it was helpful at times, it wasn't like I was running a huge company. I'm just a mid-level accountant, and my job has been stable for years. There wasn't any big rise in my income that she could point to and say, I helped him get there. Still, she tried to push this idea. She kept saying she had sacrificed her own career in marketing to support mine. But the truth is, she didn't work for long before deciding she wanted to stay home, and that was her choice, not something I ever asked her to do. Her lawyer brought this up again and again, trying to make me look like someone who benefited from her sacrifice, but there wasn't much proof to back that up. At one point, they even tried to involve my parents in the case. Maria wanted to prove that my parents had secretly been giving me money or helping me hide assets. This really made me angry because my parents had nothing to do with this. Dragging them into it was a cheap move, but thankfully, my lawyer shut down that idea pretty quickly. It was clear Maria was getting desperate. As the divorce went on, Maria decided to take matters into her own hands. Since she wasn't getting what she wanted through the courts, she tried to ruin my reputation instead. She started telling everyone in our social circle that I had been hiding money from her and that I was financially abusive during our marriage. I couldn't believe the lies she was spreading. Mutual friends would tell me about how she kept going on, claiming I was leaving her with nothing. She started saying that I had tricked her into thinking we had more money than we actually did. She even went on social media, posting vague but obvious comments about narcissistic partners and betrayal. Of course, some people sided with her. There are always people who take the side of the person who looks like they've been wronged. But most of our close friends knew better. They knew I wasn't the type to do something like that. It was frustrating to watch her try to ruin my reputation just because things weren't going her way, but I tried not to let it bother me. I knew the truth, and the people who mattered knew it too. Besides, I had bigger things to focus on, like making sure she didn't take more than she deserved. While Maria was busy spreading lies, I was making sure I was fully prepared. My lawyer and I were in constant contact, making sure we had all the evidence needed to prove my side of the story. I documented every interaction I had with Maria, every demand she made, and every time she tried to make me look like the bad guy. I knew that if this ever went to court, having that proof would be important. I also started gathering evidence of her affair with James. While cheating doesn't always have a big impact on divorce settlements, I wanted to make sure it was clear that she wasn't the victim here. I had screenshots of the texts she sent him, pictures they took together, and even statements from some of her friends who knew about the affair but kept quiet. It wasn't about embarrassing her, I just wanted the truth to come out. On top of that, I began preparing for the fallout. I knew that once she realized she wasn't going to get half of everything, things would get ugly. So, I kept my distance, focused on my work and life, while making sure I was ready for the next stage of the divorce. One thing that made the whole situation even more interesting was James's reaction. When Maria first told him she wanted to leave me for him, he seemed all for it. They had this fantasy of starting a new life together. But once the divorce started getting complicated, James began to pull back. It turns out he wasn't as committed to Maria as she thought. From what I've heard, he started getting cold feet when he realized being with her might mean dealing with her financial problems. Maria had expected this big new life with James, but he wasn't ready to commit to that. James started losing clients at the gym because of the scandal. It turns out people don't want a trainer who's known for getting involved with married women. Now James is trying to distance himself from Maria, and she's starting to see that this isn't the fairy tale she thought it would be. I almost feel sorry for her, but then I remember everything she's done. As for me, I'm feeling conflicted. On one hand, I feel a sense of relief. I'm glad I protected my assets, and I'm glad Maria isn't walking away with what she expected. But at the same time, I feel sad. This was my marriage, and I once loved Maria. I thought we were going to build a life together. Seeing it all fall apart like this is tough, even if I know it's for the best. Update 1. Things have taken a pretty crazy turn since my last update. Maria is getting desperate, and it's starting to show in the worst ways. She has realized that she's not going to get the big payout she was hoping for, and now she's trying to make my life miserable. The latest thing is that she's been threatening to ruin my career and reputation at work. She told me that if I didn't make things easier for her, meaning give her more money, she'd make sure everyone at my firm thought I was a terrible person. At first, I wasn't sure what she meant by that, but it became clear when she started showing up at my office without warning. The first time, she acted calm, pretending she just needed to talk. But when I told her there was nothing left to discuss, she lost it. She started raising her voice, saying things like, "I'll make sure everyone here knows the truth about you." Luckily, I was able to get her out of there before it escalated, but it's clear she's becoming unpredictable. Her behavior at home, well, at her temporary home with her parents, has been erratic too. After realizing she wasn't going to get a big payday, she moved back in with her parents. From what I've heard, things aren't going well for her there. Her parents are supportive, but they're not exactly happy with how everything's turned out. Even they seem to see through her victim act. Some mutual friends have told me she's been lashing out, getting into fights with her family, and acting like she's on the edge of a breakdown. Update 2. The legal side of things has become more complicated too. Maria's lawyer is trying everything to dig up dirt on me. They've filed motions to subpoena my parents' financial records, even though my lawyer has explained multiple times that my parents' assets aren't part of this divorce. It's clearly an attempt to shake me up, but it's not working. Maria's legal team also filed a motion to question my coworkers, hoping to find anything that might suggest I'm hiding something. It's getting intense, but I'm staying calm and focused on making sure they don't get more than they're legally entitled to. They're trying to say that I'm hiding money or getting paid under the table, but they're just grasping at straws. It's exhausting to deal with. Every time we think we've addressed one of their requests, they come back with something else. The whole situation feels like a never-ending game of chess. Every move I make, Maria and her team try to counter. Thankfully, I've been able to stay ahead, thanks to my lawyer and the legal protections my father set up years ago. But it's draining, and I'm not sure how long I can keep this up before we end up in court for real. Speaking of legal matters, we've already tried mediation twice, and both times it was a disaster. The first session ended after about 30 minutes because Maria refused to back down from her demand for half of the house and our savings. My lawyer explained that the house was in my father's name and that there wasn't nearly as much money as she thought, but Maria didn't want to hear it. She stormed out, accusing me of lying and saying the mediator was biased against her. The second attempt wasn't much better. This time, Maria showed up with a list of totally unrealistic demands. She wanted full ownership of the house, half of all our savings even though they barely exist, and alimony for at least 6 years. When my lawyer calmly explained again that she wasn't entitled to any of that, Maria lost it. She started yelling about how she had sacrificed everything for me and how I was leaving her with nothing. I tried to stay calm, but inside, I was furious. She was the one who cheated. She was the one who wanted the divorce, and now she's acting like I'm ruining her life. It's unbelievable. After that session, it became clear that this divorce is headed to court whether I like it or not. On top of everything, Maria has been borrowing money from her family and friends to pay her legal fees. She clearly didn't expect the divorce to drag on this long, and now she's running out of funds. I'm not sure how she plans to keep paying her aggressive lawyer, but that's not my problem. The more desperate she gets, the more erratic her behavior becomes. Mutual friends have told me that she's spending most of her time at home, complaining to anyone who will listen about how I've ruined her life. It's gotten so bad that some of her friends have started distancing themselves from her because they're tired of the drama and her constant victim act. It seems like everything Maria thought she was going to get from this divorce is slipping through her fingers. Throughout all of this, I've been doing my best to stay calm and handle things strategically. Every time Maria makes a new accusation or demand, I make sure I'm prepared. I countered every accusation with proof. Anytime they asked for financial documents, I provided them because I had nothing to hide. My lawyer has been great about making sure we follow the law exactly, which is more than I can say for Maria's team. I've also been working hard to protect my parents' privacy. Maria's attempts to drag them into this mess have been frustrating, but thankfully there are legal protections in place to stop her from accessing their financial records. Still, the fact that she's even trying shows how desperate she's become. It's like she thinks if she digs deep enough, she'll find some hidden treasure I've been keeping from her, but there's nothing for her to find. Update 3. The day of the court hearing finally arrived, and the tension was intense. Maria was the first to testify, and she didn't hold back. She made it clear that she believed I had been hiding assets from her all along. She accused me of manipulating our finances, hiding money in secret accounts, and lying to her about how much we really had. She got emotional, painting herself as the victim who had sacrificed her career to support mine, only to be left with nothing. At one point, she was even sobbing, talking about how she had trusted me with everything and was blindsided by the divorce and my supposed financial tricks. But then came the turning point. My lawyer presented evidence of her affair with James. Once the texts, pictures, and details of her relationship with him were revealed, it became clear to everyone, jury, judge, everyone, what was really going on. Maria's story of being the victim started to fall apart right in front of me. At one point, she tried to downplay the affair, saying it was just a mistake and had nothing to do with the divorce, but by then the damage was done. Her credibility was ruined, and it was clear that her financial demands were more about greed than anything else. When it was my turn to testify, I stayed calm and focused on the facts. My lawyer had prepared me well, and I knew that getting emotional or defensive wouldn't help my case. I explained how my assets had been in my father's name for years, how I had provided full financial disclosures, and how I had tried to handle the divorce peacefully through mediation. I also talked about Maria's threats, her unpredictable behavior, and the smear campaign she had been running against me. My lawyer presented all the evidence of her accusations, both publicly and in court, and showed how baseless they were. We laid out the truth about our finances. The house belonged to my father, our savings were modest, and there was no hidden stash of money that Maria could claim. The judge seemed to appreciate how straightforward I was, and it felt like things were finally starting to turn in my favor. I didn't try to make Joyce look bad, but I also didn't hide the truth of what happened. The facts were clear, and I presented them without drama or exaggeration. A few key witnesses were called during the trial, and their testimonies helped wrap things up. First, my father took the stand. He explained the financial arrangement we had set up years ago, how the house was in his name, how the investments were under his control, and how all of this was done as a long-term financial protection. He made it clear that these assets were his, not mine, and that Joyce had no legal right to them. Next was one of my colleagues from work. Maria's team had tried to argue that I was hiding money by getting paid under the table or through secret bonuses. But my colleague quickly shut that down. He testified about my modest income and how my salary was transparent. There were no hidden payments, just the regular paycheck I had already disclosed. These witnesses were crucial in proving that Maria's accusations were groundless. The judge could see that there was no secret plan on my part, just a simple financial setup that Maria hadn't bothered to understand. After days of testimony and legal arguments, the judge finally gave the verdict. It was a huge relief to hear the decision. The divorce was ruled in my favor. Maria's demands for half of the house and our savings were denied completely. The judge ruled that since the house and most of our assets were in my father's name, Maria had no right to them. The only thing she was awarded was a small amount of alimony for a short time, just enough to cover her legal fees, not enough to maintain the lifestyle she was hoping for. The judge made it clear that her affair and her lack of financial contribution to the household played a role in his decision. He saw through her attempts to play the victim and ruled accordingly. As the decision was read, I felt a huge weight lift off my shoulders. All the stress, the constant accusations, and the fear of losing everything melted away in that moment. I knew I was legally in the clear. Joyce, on the other hand, didn't take it well. As soon as the judge finished, she burst into tears, yelling that the system was unfair and that I had cheated her out of what was rightfully hers. She stormed out of the courtroom, leaving her lawyer looking exhausted. It was clear she hadn't prepared herself for the possibility of losing. For me, the immediate feeling was pure relief. I thanked my lawyer, who had done a great job throughout the whole process, and left the courthouse. My phone was buzzing with messages from friends and family congratulating me on the outcome. Word had spread quickly, and people in the community were already talking about the case. It felt good to know the truth was out and that I could finally move on with my life. But Joyce wasn't done. Outside the courthouse, she had a complete meltdown in front of a small crowd. She started screaming, saying that I had lied and manipulated the system, and that she was going to appeal the decision. The problem is, she doesn't have the money to do that. Her lawyer made it clear during the trial that she was running out of funds, and from what I've heard, she's still borrowing money from family and friends just to get by. That being said, I'm extremely grateful for my father's advice and foresight when it came to protecting my finances. Without his help, I don't know what kind of mess I'd be in right now. I'm also thankful for the support of my friends, family, and colleagues who stood by me, even when Maria was spreading rumors and trying to ruin my reputation. Looking forward, I'm hopeful. I know it will take time to fully recover, both emotionally and financially, but I'm ready to move on with my life. I've learned some important lessons from all of this, and I won't make the same mistakes again. For now, I'm focused on getting back to a sense of normalcy and enjoying the peace that comes with finally closing this chapter.